Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Zulrah ended up losing the community poll, so the last video you got to see just how much you can make from Fedorovas. But that was the last video, and this is this week's video, and I'll be showing you 1 hour's loot from Zulrah as an average player. If you enjoy, please leave a like, and if you want to see more, hit that subscribe button for more content. Getting into it like we always do, we're going to look at requirements. Firstly, you'll need to complete regicide, which is actually a pretty low requirement for the boss itself. I also recommend getting Song of the Elves done at some point, as killing Zulrah using full crystal armor and a bofa is extremely good here, but I won't be using it for today's test. I also recommend completion of a Kingdom Divided for Thralls, since these boost damage a considerable amount, but they aren't really required as half the time it bugs out. For the skills, at least 75 range to use the blowpipe, as well as 78 magic to use the toxic trident will be required for the two weapons. You'll also need the minimum stats to use Void Knight armor if you aren't comfortable doing a complete gear switch. If you plan to use different gear from Void Knight armor, you require higher stats to help boost your damage, such as 70 defense for Blessed Dragonhide and Ahrams. You'll also need a minimum of 75 hit points to wear the Ring of Suffering, which you'll want imbued and charged with Rings of Recoil. 40 prayer is also going to be required for Protect from Ranged, with a higher level being better obviously. And finally, you're going to need 76 agility to use the shortcut to save a ton of time getting there, as there are other methods, but they do add a considerable amount of time or cost. So as a quick summary for what you'll need stat wise, you need 75 ranged, 78 magic, 75 hit points, 40 prayer, 76 agility, and if you're using Void, at least 42 in your melee stats, and if using other armor, scale your defense accordingly. Obviously, you don't need massive defense stats or even really good gear, as evidenced by the amount of bots that show up here in rags, but the better gear you have, the more kills per hour you can get. As far as what I'll be bringing for this hour's kills, it's going to be a fairly affordable setup that I think the average player could get a hold of with little trouble, Iron Man excluded obviously. I'll be using Blessed D'hide Body and Chaps, a Fury, a Serpentine Visage, Boots of Brimstone, a Blessing, Ava's Assembler, although you can use any other Ava's device, Barrow's Gloves, a Toxic Blowpipe, and a Ring of Suffering, although you can use Rings of Recoil instead. For the magic switch, I'll have my Occult, Ahrams top and bottom, Tormented Bracelet, an Imbued God Cape, and a Toxic Trident of the Swamp. And if this is a little bit too expensive for you, just remember that you can downgrade gear fairly easily here, with the only hard requirements that I would say being the Suffering and the weapons. I've also got the wiki's suggested gear up on screen for you to look at to see where you can save a little bit of money, although in my opinion, if you're tight on funds, spend some time at Pest Control for a strong but free upgrade. I wouldn't recommend using the Dagonhai or Infinity Robes here though if you choose to downgrade, as they cost just as much as Ahrams, and I would suggest to use Mystic instead. For the inventory, have your range switch first, followed by prayer potions. A Bastion or super ranged, and I would recommend a super ranged as they're about 1/10 of the cost of a Bastion. A teleport to your house, a rune pouch filled with Thrall runes, a Book of the Dead, and then the rest filled up with food. If you decide to use Rings of Recoil over a Suffering, be sure to bring 2 for each kill you plan on being there, as you'll go through them pretty quickly. And this gives us a total gear cost of just over 34 million at the time of recording, including the inventory. This isn't too expensive in my opinion, and much of the gear used for this is required for other activities, so the upgrades do tend to even out over time. This is with Zenyte jewelry being just over 10 million GP each at the time of this recording, and they do tend to fluctuate a bit, as just last week they were about 8.5 million, so keep an eye on those prices and score a deal. Now that we're geared up, let's get into killing Zulrah, which can be a daunting task at first. If you're anything like me, you tried Zulrah once, got instantly teleported back to Lumbridge, and said nope. But I promise, Zulrah gets almost AFKable once you get it down. I've got all the tiles marked in RuneLight where I want to be, and I'll be sure to post them down below to help out anyone struggling with this boss. Before you enter, sip your super ranged potion, make sure your Zulrah helper is open, and take the boat in. Once you enter the arena, go to the northeastern corner to start the encounter, and rotate your camera so that the arena looks like a lowercase n. You'll use the opposite style of what Zulrah is attacking with, and pray according to the color of Zulrah. For example, if Zulrah is green, protect from ranged and attack with melee. When Zulrah is blue, protect from magic and attack with ranged. And when Zulrah goes red, attack with magic and just move out of the way of its attacks. Finally, Zulrah has a little Jad phase at the end of the cycle where you have to switch between protection prayers, which isn't as bad as it sounds. And I really do recommend using RuneLight to use the Zulrah helper, as this is for just average people like me who need help every now and then. Zulrah doesn't really have any sort of special attacks that it does, and there's no real need worrying about moving at exactly the perfect tick. The only special attacks that Zulrah has, if you can call them that, are the spawning mechanic, as I'm going to call it, where Zulrah calls out little snakelings to attack you, and the cloud attack, which disperses venomous clouds throughout the arena. The snakelings are easily neutralized by either using Rings of Recoil or a charged Suffering, since they only have 1 hit point. And the clouds are a non-issue as long as you don't step into them, so make sure that you're keeping up with the fight and where to stand. And I'll let this continue rolling to show just an average kill here. So we can see after an hour's testing at Zulrah, I managed to get 18 kills in an hour, with a total loot just short of 1.3 million GP made. When looking at our supply costs, we can see it did cost me 452,000 GP in supplies, and this does include the death, although house teleports aren't shown. I factored them in at a cost of 538 GP at the time of recording, starting with 40 for the hour, and ending with technically 25 due to using one after a death, costing 13,500 GP for the tabs used. Also not shown is the cost of repairing my Arims, which I fully repaired at the start of the hour, and repaired at the end with Bob to avoid smithing level discounts, costing me 1,553 GP. This leaves us with a total profit of 813,939 GP for the hour, using fairly average gear. Really, I doubt that by using Mystics or Void my profit would have changed too much, as most of the damage is negated here by overhead prayers, leaving you with the odd off-hit prayer and the snakelings. Overall, it wasn't too bad of a time, and definitely kept me engaged in killing Zulrah, and it isn't a terrible profit if you exclude the death, although it is much more relaxed using a Bofa as most of my kills are here. I'm glad I decided to do this, as I don't usually do Zulrah the way it was intended, but it was fun to do. I look forward to doing more of my 1 hour as an average player, and can't wait to bring you guys the next video. If you did enjoy, please leave a like and consider subscribing, it'd really mean a lot to me. And don't forget to join the Discord for the next time I do a poll, or just to have a place to chat with other people. And as always, take care, and thank you for watching.